You will allow me first to make my official speech. Alafu ndachukua muda kidogo sana. I speak off the cuff. Alafu nitamalizia hapo. Mmeniruhusu? Asante. So representatives from the University Students Association, esteemed student members, members of the business community, members of the Bunge la Wananchi, Member of Parliament for Keses constituency, my friend, professional colleague and brother Julius Ruto, my two principal secretaries, the county commissioner, ambaye leo sisi ni wageni wake, the county government led by the county secretary and members of county assembly represented here, other distinguished guests, wafanyikazi wa serikali ya juu na ya county. Kuna mtu nimewanja nje? Jua kali sector, Bunge la Wananchi, the business community. Wacha nimalizie kusema distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. First, I want to make it clear that this process that we are undertaking today, this engagement, is not an academic exercise. We have deliberately made a decision as National Treasury to engage the public. When I got into this office, I made a promise to the people of Kenya that I'm going to demystify what National Treasury is all about and make it an institution that interacts with the people we serve, because we work for you. And therefore, the exercise that we are carrying out today, which began from Migori, is going to cover 7 regions of this country if you leave out Nairobi. But we are going to have 8 engagements. For Nyanza region, we had the engagement in Migori. For the Western region, yesterday we were in Kakamega. Today we are here for the North Rift region because Rift Valley is very expansive. From here, we will have engagement in Nakuru for the South and Central Rift. And then I will proceed to Kiambu for the Central region. Lastly, we will have the last leg, which will begin from Garissa for the Northern Kenya region. We go to Kilifi for the Coast region. And finally, we will end with Meru for the Eastern region. During these engagements, we will be listening to Kenyans, especially the young people, because the youth form 75% of our population. That is a population that you cannot ignore. That is a population that you must engage and listen to continuously to adjust your policies and adjust your programs to fit in the interest of that segment of our population. Allow me to mention the following. That I want to start by extending to you a warm welcome to this Stakeholder Engagement Forum. And I wish to thank you all for finding time to attend this very critical event that provides us with an opportunity to share our views on the management of public resources in the country, and particularly in the budget process, more so as it relates to our development agenda. This process builds up onto not only from the meeting that I held on the 10th of December 2025 in Nairobi, where I launched the National Budget Students Forum with the sole purpose of embedding a youth-centric perspective into our national economic decision-making processes, but is also from my previous engagements with Bunge la Wananchi on budget process. I'm sure you still remember my engagement at Jivanji Garden last year. And that engagement proceeded or went on to Mombasa, and we even held an engagement in Kibra at night to just discuss our public policy issues as regarding the budget making process. So during this launch, which took place on 10th of December, it was agreed on the need for a wider engagement with the youth of this country in their respective regions on matters pertaining to public finance management. But further to that, further to engaging with the youth, in view of the recent government efforts on privatization, it has also been deemed fit to broaden this engagement to include the business community and the Bunge la Wananchi for a more comprehensive stakeholder information and participation. That is why today, apart from the youth, we are also here with representation or representatives from the business community and also representatives from Bunge la Wananchi and even the county governments and the national government, so that we can understand what is this animal in the room called privatization. And I will come to that when I'm making my off-the-cuff remarks, so that you can understand what the government of Kenya is trying to do. To avoid listening to distortions from the naysayers, I am sure I will be capable enough to address some of your concerns and fears regarding the proposed actions that we want to take, and more particularly regarding the divestiture of most shares in Safaricom and also the privatization proposal for the Kenya Pipeline Company. The successful engagement with the Bunge la Wananchi in the last financial year, as I mentioned, could only be built upon. Feedback from that engagement and feedback from the membership of the Bunge la Wananchi, it was agreed that engagement must continue. The National Treasury's engagement with members of the business community is also not new. Under my watch, it has definitely been enriching in shaping my resolve to have in place more inclusive policies that allow more Kenyans to participate in public resource management. So, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to emphasize that this is not just a policy initiative, but rather it is a legal obligation which is rooted in our Constitution, Article 201A of the Constitution of Kenya, which mandates for public participation in all financial matters so as to enhance transparency, accountability, efficient utilization of resources, and value for money in the management of our public resources. At the National Treasury, we have come to the realization that the government alone cannot effectively respond to the multifaceted challenges facing our country, particularly on unemployment, gaps in skills development, digital literacy, entrepreneurship, and inclusive governance for a demographic dividend. In this regard, I have prioritized stakeholder participation as a key dimension of governance and one of the pillars for a sustainable development. We shall enhance collaboration with our stakeholders, including the youth, private sector, experts, civil society organizations, volunteers, and local communities, which is ever more critical in our public discourse. By forging partnerships and collaboration, the government will harness the ideas, skills, and resources to diverse stakeholders to better deliver services and policies in transformative ways and address the existing gaps in financial, human, and technical resources. I wish again to reiterate that the youth are a significant demographic of our country, making up over 75% of the population with a potential for contributing towards economic development of the country. And in this regard, their voices must be central to how we plan, allocate, and utilize our resources. This has therefore necessitated a shift in public financial management towards inclusive and participatory governance, where citizens, including youth, actively engage and participate in policy formulation and act as co-creators of government policies and services. Ladies and gentlemen, Kenya has adopted privatization as a strategic economic policy shift to promote efficiency in the economy by subjecting more services to market forces, to improve competitiveness, revenue generation, aid in fiscal consolidation pathway by reducing government spending on inefficient state corporations, and market development in deepening Kenya's capital market. So the objective of our privatization agenda is to ease the burden of governance of these institutions from the government to the private sector, who are better equipped for the market economy. The National Treasury will in this regard continue with sound macroeconomic policies to enhance resilience and create a conducive environment for the private sector to thrive, including the local business communities. This strategic response is anchored in our bottom-up economic transformation agenda and also on the fourth medium-term plan, MTP4. And these frameworks prioritize sectors with high youth employment potential, such as agriculture, micro, small, and medium enterprises, housing, healthcare, and of course, the digital and creative economy. And these sectors are not only engines of growth, but also platforms for innovation, entrepreneurship, and job creation for the youth. So over the recent past, the youth of this country have expressed themselves over important national issues, which include high cost of living, unemployment, and governance transparency. We still remember vividly 2024, more particularly, what would have turned out as a dark day in this country. That was the 25th of June, 2024. What the youth of this country were protesting about was the issue of high or rising cost of living. Number two, the youth were also complaining about unemployment. They are coming out of colleges with good certificates. Their parents have exchanged ng'ombe with papers, certificates. Papers which should help them better their lives. Papers that should help them get job opportunities. But alas, when they come out, there are no employment opportunities available. The other thing that the youth were complaining about was the issue of governance and transparency. The youth is telling us that they are not happy with the way we are using their resources, that we must change, that we must adopt transparency, that we must adopt accountability, that we must adopt prudent use of public resources. These concerns are valid. These concerns demand for immediate action. We cannot just sit and watch as students complain, as youth complain, and as they express themselves. And that is why the government must be committed to transforming the frustrations that our youth are going through into constructive dialogue and tangible action. We must dialogue with our youth. We must act on their demands. We must put to the best our ability to make sure that we transform these frustrations into productive engagement for the betterment and progress of our country. This forum, therefore, provides one of those perfect opportunities to provide our feedback on the necessary action from the government to address these challenges. So during this process, we will welcome positive critique of our public financial management systems and policies to shape the budget process. Your active engagement in this process will ensure efficient and transparent use of public funds, ensuring that resources are allocated to address youth empowerment and that the allocation achieves the intended objectives. So, ladies and gentlemen, during the launch of this process, I was elated and I was very happy to have received a written memorandum outlining some practical measures through which we can enhance financial support for students in tertiary institutions. And just to make you comfortable, just by engaging in at that initial stages, I wish to report that if you go and you Google, I know you said you don't have bundles, but you can combine your strengths and Google National Treasury website. If you go and check the National Treasury website, and you look at the BPS, Budget Policy Statement for 2026, which we will be tabling in Parliament in February, you will see that the allocation for Higher Education Loans Board
is moving from what was provided in 2025, last year, or the year that is yet progressing, the current financial year. We provided 41 billion Kenya shillings for higher education loan support. That is proposed to increase by about 40%, from 41 billion to 58 billion. And the university scholarship, that part which is not loan, is also proposed to increase from about 16 billion this financial year to 34 billion in the next financial year. That therefore means that the two, if you add 16 billion to 41 billion, that is 57, and is likely to move from 57 to 92 billion, the two figures put together. That is a reaction to the concerns that we have got from the students. Directly, we are responding. And by the way, the budget for education is going to increase with not less than 50 billion shillings in the next financial year. But we are working on the figures and looking at our budget to see if we can even make more resources available for education, because a society that does not care and invest in education of their population is a society that is destined to collapse. That's not a society that would make progress. So we have noted the feedback, which includes strengthening financial support for student financing, as I've mentioned, reforming students' loan financing through fiscal policy, targeted student grant funding for vulnerable students, facilitate provision of affordable student accommodation, and I have taken note of the Eldoret National Polytechnic that requires more accommodation facilities, and establishing an emergency student support fund. This will be consolidated alongside the views from the other regions for consolidation during the preparation of the financial year 2026-27 and the medium-term budget process. Furthermore, we are aware of the financial strains facing our public institutions, which impact the quality of education and future prospects of our youth. Our strategy emphasizes increasing funding, infrastructure development, and curriculum reforms to equip students with skills relevant to the evolving job market, particularly in areas like artificial intelligence, data science, green technologies, and finally, vocational trades. So those are the areas that we are going to target. Artificial intelligence, because we are living in a global community which is moving very fast in terms of technology. We must keep pace. Data science is an area that we must invest in. Green technologies is another area of investment. And of course, the vocational trades. We must learn as a country to accept that vocational training is an integral part of any societal development. If you go to those countries which pride themselves of having developed, you will realize that employment is not a problem because people don't choose jobs. Today in Kenya, I would tell you, those of us who have tried to get services of plumbers, electricians, and the rest, I will tell you, they are difficult to find today because of the affordable housing. I have a plumber who has been working for me for many years. When I wanted to get his engagement, he told me, Waziri, I'm sorry, I'm so busy, I have too much work. He used to be very idle. Today, that gentleman is not as idle as he used to be. I have to now plead with him to squeeze some time for me. That is the country that we should live in, where all trades have something, where all people with different expertise have something to do, have something to offer to the economy. And I will come back to that. Ladies and gentlemen, as you are aware, the government has been in the process of formulating 2026-27 financial year budget and also the medium term. We have, in this regard, prepared a draft 2026 budget policy statement containing the proposed policies and resource limitations for the period. That is the resource envelope. It's already on our website. This document has already been uploaded on the National Treasury website for public review and comments. I am looking forward to receiving valuable comments from you to inform its finalization before we submit it finally to Parliament by mid-February. I wish to urge for your concerted effort to enable us build a Kenya where opportunities are accessible to all, where youth are empowered to lead, and where our collective aspirations become reality. Together, we can forge a prosperous, inclusive, and resilient nation. On privatization, and I'm drawing to a close. Nimebaki na very few papers. Then it has sema machache off the cuff. So, ladies and gentlemen, on privatization, I have this to say. Privatization is often part of a broader process of structural reform. Privatization transactions are complex and require careful consideration of a number of issues. Well-designed and implemented privatization policies are essential to ensure credibility of reforms, to help governments achieve their objectives, and to create efficient and competitive markets for goods and services. Privatization of state-owned enterprises ushers in the private sector to participate in commercial activities that government-owned enterprises are taking. This is necessary because the private sector carries out commercial activities more efficiently than public sector, especially in competitive industry. By the way, I hope you are aware that you as individuals and your private businesses are included when I make reference to the private sector. It's not some strange animal somewhere. If you can do some small business, you are also in the space of the private sector. The benefits of privatization include, but is not limited to, the following. One, lower prices, better quality of goods and services produced, wider choices for consumers, more innovation, minimal red tape in decision making, and of course, less corruption. That is the value and virtues which the private sector bring into business. Less corruption. To safeguard these benefits of privatization, the government has a social obligation to maintain a fair business environment through appropriate regulations and policies. Already, Kenya has developed a fairly robust regulatory environment with the Competition Authority of Kenya overseeing all sectors of the economy, supported by sector-specific regulators such as Communications Authority of Kenya. So privatization as a key tool to address the following three main or major economic issues. That is, balancing of government debts, public expenditure
Rationalization and revenue raising, which we also call revenue mobilization. So we talk about revenue mobilization, we talk about expenditure limiting government debt, constraining budget deficits, that is reducing budget deficit. And that is one of the questions to make sure that we correct the messes of the past. To optimal levels, and hence can not be pushed further. Kenyans are saying they are choked. You target rich. After after targeting trade should never be taxed. So we should try as much as possible to reduce taxes on trade. Let people do business, make their money, and that is why you find our unemployment levels continue to rise. We need to look at that area very carefully. And I've tasked my team at the National Treasury to see how we can make trade more friendly in terms of tax policies. You will agree with me that unlike taxation, this is aggregate demand, which in the long run would widen the revenue base. So privatization does not reduce wealth. Instead, it enhances. As I wind up, I want to just mention interest rates, currency GDP growth. We must turn to innovative financing mechanism to fund our infrastructure and public service projects. As the financial needs of the government continue to outpace our available public resources, private sector participation has become a critical tool in addressing infrastructure gaps, enhancing service delivery, and promoting sustainable development. There are many success stories. I know one of us spoke about cases where privatization has failed. And indeed, it is true. There have been previous attempts to privatize some government institutions with disastrous outcomes, like Uchumi Supermarket. But probably one of the reasons why Uchumi failed and others which have failed is because of the timing. Privatization, if you don't time it perfectly, then you definitely fail. But those privatizations that have been timed have succeeded. And let me give you examples. The first one is with regards to Safaricom. Safaricom was started in 1997 as a small department in government, very tiny. It was making profit, yes, but it was not a profit worth talking about. The government, therefore, made a decision at one point to privatize Safaricom. We are not privatizing Safaricom today. Safaricom was privatized several years back when we allowed 40% of the share ownership to be released to Vodacom. So the government then of President Moi retained 60%. 40% was sold out or divested and released to Vodacom through Vodafone Kenya, which is a subsidiary of Vodacom South Africa, which Vodacom South Africa is a subsidiary also of Vodafone UK. So the parent company is called Vodafone UK. Vodafone UK formed a subsidiary in South Africa called Vodacom. That subsidiary came and invested in Kenya and formed a subsidiary called Vodafone Kenya. So it is Vodafone Kenya which owns 40% today of Safaricom. 60% was still held by the government. Come 2008, President Kibaki saw it fit that the government was still too heavy in Safaricom. And decided to release more ownership of Safaricom. But at that time, a decision was made to release and left us with 60 as a government. through the National Treasury. I am the shareholder in Safaricom on behalf of the people of Kenya. After that, Kibaki came and released 25% to the people, both Kenyans and foreign investors. Now that took away 65% of ownership of Safaricom from the government. Today, the government has only 35%. But the kind of profit that we are now getting out of this 35, the dividend that Safaricom gives government, is much more than when we held 100% of Safaricom. Why? Because the private sector brought in efficiency and management style that has transformed Safaricom to be the largest and the most profitable company in East and Central Africa. There's not even a single company that makes more profit than Safaricom. So we have this 35, but we are still making much more money. But then, in business, you must always be dynamic and pragmatic. If you sleep and you say, yes, because now I'm making huge profits, that there should be no changes, this Safaricom must continue, must remain. Let me tell you, the telecommunication sector is very dynamic and require and changes every day. There is technological advancement. Safaricom must respond. Safaricom must invest in other regional markets. Already Safaricom has gone to Ethiopia. They have not broken even. They are still not making profit, but they have expanded into Ethiopia. Safaricom must be supported to get into other markets in the region. And that will require heavy investment. Even before we go to talk about government financial needs, let us talk about the Safaricom as a company, Safaricom Kenya, which we call Safaricom PLC. It requires more money. And let me tell you this. People who have knowledge in finance, like us, we know this for a fact. That when a company requires more resources, more capital injection, they will do what we call capital call. They will go to the shareholders and tell them, we need money, we need 50 billion, we cannot continue operating the way it is, we need 50 billion. And the moment they say they need 50 billion, the government of Kenya holding 35% will be required to contribute 35% of that 50 billion, which will translate to about 16, 17, 18 billion. Now, at that time, already a call has been made. A call is made to John Badi, who is the CS National Treasury. I am sitting at the National Treasury, and Safaricom needs 18 billion. And at that time, lecturers are in the streets protesting for low salary. They want their salary to be enhanced. Our doctors are in Upper Hill calling Duale to come down because there is no money. Our children need more money to go to school. There is no capitation. We need more money to go to SHA because the 13 billion that I put for primary health care is not enough. You require more, 4 billion more, like now I've been told. We have to release 4 billion more to go to SHA for primary health care. 8 billion that we have put for emergency, chronic, and critical illnesses like cancer, diabetes is not enough. I am weighing these options. Do you think I will put money in Safaricom, or I will put money to pay lecturers, and put money to pay SHA, and put money to pay capitation? Which one, where will I put money? Will I put money for education of our children, or give money for more shares in Safaricom? And what then happens to Safaricom? This is what will happen. Because the government of Kenya as a shareholder has no money to put, the other shareholders will come in to put more money where the government would have put. And your shareholding will be diluted without paying you even a shilling, whether you like it or not. And it has happened with KCB previously. KCB, there was a call-up like that. Government didn't have money. Our share ownership came down automatically because there were other investors ready to put in money to get the company on its feet.
That can happen with Safaricom. And we have seen it. That is why we are saying we must release some of the ownership of shares in Safaricom. When we can be paid good sum of money, reasonable, decent, 204 billion is not pocket change. Even if we were to wait for that dividend from Safaricom, how much is it? 15% gives us about 7 billion per year. This 15% that we are releasing would give us 15%, about 7 billion at the current dividend payout rate per year. Divide 204 by 7, how many years is that? About 30 years is when we will get this money that we are getting today. That is before you take into consideration the time value of money. As accountants, we know what we call time value of money. 7 billion today is not the same as 7 billion 10 years from today. But let me come back a bit. I don't know whether I'm speaking to anyone in the room. Let me be a
Tenga Tingawangane, bangane, wabawangane. Utingo walala, utingo nyagudu, kenu nyagudu betego. Ogana udi ya moramo. Wanataka nani? Wanapenda nani? Oje, okena. Wanapenda nani? Okena. Wanapenda nani? Aya. Wanapenda Juma. Asante sana. Okena wanapenda Juma. Okena wanapenda Juma. Maji yake ni matamu. Mazao tumeona. Asante sana. Asante. Tumruhusu party leader aketi sasa. Asante sana. Aya, ODM. Sasa wacha tusikizane tafadhali. Nataka nifanye roll call hapa. Nikiita branch yako unapiga ile nduru ambayo unaweza kupiga. Tuanze na branch ya Ikolomani. Hebu nione Ikolomani. Ikolomani Ikolomani ya. Asante. Twende branch ya Shinyalu. Shinyalu Shinyalua. Aya, twende branch ya Mumias West. Aha, Mumias West Mumias West ya. Asante, huko ni kwa mheshimiwa Mbuyu mwenyewe. Twende Mumias East. Mumias East Mumias East wa. Asante sana. Twende kwa mheshimiwa Nabulindo Matungu branch. Matungu Matungu wa. Asante sana. Haya, tukuje mbio. Twende kwa mheshimiwa Innocent Mugabe Likuyani. Likuyani ya. Asante. Haya, twende nyumbani kwangu Lugari ya. Asante sana. Twende jirani Malava. Haya, twende kwa mheshimiwa Tindi Mwale Butere ya. Asante. Twende kule kwa jirani yake kunaitwa Huisero. Huisero. Haya, tumemaliza. Twende kule Navaholo. Na sasa tumalizie na nyumbani. Haya, twende Shinyalu branch. Nilikuwa nimewatambuliza, tafadhali. Tukuje nyumbani Lurambi ya. Asanteni sana. Sasa hizo ndizo the 12 branches za Kakamega County. Sasa party leader, naomba sasa nichukue fursa hii nimkaribishe. Unajua hii ni delegates meeting. Kabla nikaribishe chairperson wetu, nitaita Deputy Secretary General wa chama Honorable Catherine Omanyo akuje awasomee resolution ya Kilifi, kisha baadaye nitamwalika chairman Italanyi mwenyewe aje awakaribishe nyumbani.
Asante sana Philip. Abandu ba Kakamega mulembe. Mulembe handi. Murio muno. Our party leader, our party chairperson, the governors, MPs wote, na engine behind the power of ODM delegates. ODM! ODM! Linda ground. Na hiyo ndio itakuwa slogan yetu forever. Nataka kusoma what was passed in Kilifi by our Central Committee. Nataka usikize kimakini sana, because as a party soldier, a soldier dies defending what the party has decided. Kwa hivyo usikize sana ukitoka hapa leo ukiulizwa kulikuwaje, what was the message? It is here. Agenda number 1, we are going to review the progress of 10-point agenda, especially compensation for victims of protests. ODM is a rock on its own. We have fought a good fight, we have kept the faith, and we are not going to relent, giving up on those who sacrificed and died defending the vision, the doctrine of the party. Agenda number 2 ni hii ya Linda ground. Wewe kama delegate, how are you going to defend, to put boundaries, to network, to partner, to merge? Usikize makini hapa. Early preparations for the 2027 general election. The Central Committee noted that general elections will be held next year and resolved that the party cannot afford to wait to begin preparations. The committee directed that structured work commence immediately towards positioning ODM not only to contest next year's general elections but to form the next government. Mtu aseme to form the next government, including policy development, organizational readiness, coalition building, and candidate preparedness. We are always prepared. Ndio huwa tunasema ODM tuko tayari. And then the third one was pre-election political alliances. The committee meeting expressed the intention to initiate structured negotiations with different political formations, beginning with United Democratic Alliance. To this end, we have mandated, highlight and make it bold. We have mandated the party leader to commence this process. Concurrently, consultations with the party members